You know, sometimes a movie comes out that I could best describe as the eye of a storm. Like, there's this big cloud of controversy and conflict raging all around it, but when you actually sit down and watch the thing, it turns out to be a pretty standard, middle of the road, and slightly underwhelming experience that leaves you wondering what all the fucking fuss was about. Such is the case with Run, Hide, Fight, a 2021 action thriller about a young woman fighting to protect her friends from a high school shooting. It's the first movie distributed by the Daily Wire, and of course it deals with some pretty emotive subject matter, so needless to say, the film was polarising as fuck when it came out. Professional critics hated it, and if the audience scores anything to go by, then viewers absolutely loved it. Which leaves me kinda stuck in the middle with the slightly daunting task of putting politics aside and just reviewing the film as an artistic work that stands on its own merits. So, what the fuck is the drinker's take on Run, Hide, Fight? Well, it's kind of a mixed bag, really. Neither a glorious triumph nor a miserable disaster. In fact, if I had to sum it up in terms of radioactive dosage, I would say it's
3.6. Not great, not terrible.
I mean, there's definitely positive aspects to it. The main character is well developed, likeable, compelling, and played by an actress who delivers a captivating performance. Holy shit, a strong female character in a modern movie who isn't a fucking invincible, unstoppable superhero? What's ever next? There's some decent emotional payoffs, with the opening scene dovetailing nicely with the ending, and some pretty well constructed setup for future events that integrate well into the story. And there's some scenes that feel surprisingly real and hard hitting, perfectly capturing the confusion and terror of a situation like this. That's the good stuff. Unfortunately, from a writing point of view, there's definitely issues with this film, the biggest of which is that instead of being a chilling drama about shocking events, it kind of devolves into a generic action thriller after a while that doesn't really mesh with what's actually happening. But to explain myself better, I guess I should give you a quick rundown of the plots. The movie focuses on Zoe, a 17-year-old high school student living with her widowed father after her mum passed away from cancer. Now she's kind of closed off and apathetic about her life. She doesn't have many friends, and basically she just wants to keep her head down and endure the last few months of high school before graduation. But that all changes when a group of students burst into the school cafeteria with guns, killing a bunch of their classmates and taking the rest hostage while live streaming the whole thing to attract national media attention. They're led by Tristan, a fucking nutjob who's carefully planned the whole thing to cause maximum chaos. Why? Well, we'll talk more about that later. Anyway, Zoe has a chance to escape the school, but when she realises that her friends are in trouble, she instead chooses to go back inside and try to save as many as possible, using the survival skills her dad taught her to turn the tables on the shooters. It's not exactly a complex story, and if you're getting vibes of Die Hard in a school, then you're not too far off. And I think this is where the script starts to run into problems, the biggest of which is that it wants to have its cake and eat it. On the one hand, it wants the visceral, senseless horror of armed men moving from room to room, indiscriminately killing innocent teenagers. But then, that's not really the kind of setup that can sustain a 2-hour movie, so it also tries to work in all the tropes of a lone hero action film. The unhinged villain with a complex plan and delusions of grandeur, the close friends being held hostage, the negotiations with law enforcement, the protagonist fighting their way through various henchmen while getting increasingly injured and exhausted, and even the threat of a bomb that could blow the whole place up. And I don't know, man, it just feels a bit tacky and exploitative trying to build a very obvious action movie plot like this against the backdrop of a school shooting. I was never entirely clear what the antagonist's plan and motivation was either. I mean, Tristan keeps making these long, grandiose and very obviously cinematic speeches that hint at a deeper motivation behind his actions, but then we never really get anything from it. He's just doing the whole thing for attention, I guess. I mean, I suppose it's a motivation by itself, and it kind of speaks volumes about where we're at as a society, but I don't know, man. It feels a little bit weird and unsatisfying. The finale implies that he has some kind of escape plan in mind the whole time, which raises quite a few questions for me. Like, were the others aware of this plan? Did they have their own contingencies? How did he intend to implement it without everyone knowing? And even if he did escape, how far did he really expect to get when he's plastered his face across every TV screen in North America? The movie kind of flirts with the issue of gun control, but it doesn't really know what it wants to say about it. Like, the shooter's comment on how easy it was to get hold of the guns used in the takeover, but then Zoe's life gets saved at one point by a man who owns a high-powered sniper rifle. She's even kind of a survivalist herself, with her dad teaching her how to hunt and kill and look out for herself. Holy shit, a father that's actually portrayed as a decent man who loves his kid and tries to pass on valuable life lessons to them? What crazy universe are we living in here? either. But it did make me wonder whether it might have been a better idea to set this movie out in the wilderness somewhere instead of a suburban school. Like maybe Zoe and a group of friends were being hunted for sport, only the antagonist didn't bank on her being so resourceful and well trained. That way she'd actually get to use the valuable skills her father taught her in a setting that makes sense. The point I'm making is that for a movie dealing with such controversial issues, Run, Hide, Fight comes across as surprisingly cautious and unsure of itself, falling back on comfortable, established tropes rather than try to engage with its difficult subject matter, which kind of makes me wonder why it chose to tackle it in the first place. It could just as easily have been set in a shopping mall, or on a ship, or a high-rise skyscraper. And it's a shame really, because like I say, there's definitely good aspects to this film. I liked Zoe as a character, and her interactions with her dad were great. It's just a shame we didn't get more of it. I like the way she projects a mental image of her mother to give her pep talks when she's struggling, and how she gradually learns to accept her loss over the course of the movie. I like that she's portrayed as flawed, human, and vulnerable, that she can get hurt and scared and has to dig deep to keep herself going. The movie's even pretty honest about her physical limitations. Yeah, she's tough and resourceful, but she's also a teenage girl, and when she tries to take on larger and stronger opponents, she absolutely gets her ass kicked. Isn't it amazing how easy it is to empathise and relate to a character when they actually have a fucking struggle to overcome? These are all good aspects, but ultimately they're not really enough to overcome the film's problems. And as much as I like the idea of new studios releasing their own movies to compete with a bloated and disconnected Hollywood and their relentless obsession with the message, it doesn't mean I'm going to give them a free pass just because they went against the grain. The drinker expects good filmmaking no matter where it comes from, and well, Run, Hide, Fight just isn't quite there. Anyway, that's all I've got for today. Go away now.